In a quiet, sleepy town in Virginia, a powerful and highly decorated officer found himself facing a nightmare that would shake his life and the town to its core. Lieutenant General Raymond Reed, a towering figure in the U.S. Army, known for his strategic brilliance and storied career, was about to be misjudged, arrested, and humiliated simply because of the color of his skin. It was supposed to be just another regular night for Raymond Reed. After a long day, he needed a break. He had been driving for hours along the busy I-95 highway, on his way to a big meeting at Fort Bragg, located a little further south. The highway cut through many small towns, and while many people passed through these towns quickly, they didn't give them much thought. But Raymond was different. He had been on the road for what felt like an eternity, and he was ready to stop, stretch his legs, and have a quick meal before continuing his journey. He pulled off the highway and into a small, quiet town called Greystone. It was the kind of place most people wouldn't think twice about, just a small dot on the map. But to Raymond, it didn't matter. He wasn't there for the sights or sounds of the town. He was just looking for a place to eat and rest for a while. Greystone was the perfect stop, a town where you could get something to eat and then get back on the road quickly. Raymond was 52 years old, and he had lived a life full of experiences and adventures that most people could only read about in books. His uniform, neatly pressed and adorned with shiny stars, told the story of his many years of service in the U.S. Army. Raymond had been through things most people could only imagine, having led soldiers in battles and helped shape important decisions that affected the country. He had worked hard, earned the respect of those around him, and built a reputation as a strong and capable leader. When people looked at Raymond, they saw someone who was accomplished, someone who had earned the right to wear his uniform with pride. That night, his uniform gleamed under the bright neon lights of Ruby's diner. The diner's buzzing lights looked old but still inviting, almost like a sign welcoming weary travelers like Raymond. It was a place where people could take a break, enjoy a warm meal, and relax before heading back to their busy lives. Little did Raymond know that as he parked his car and stepped out into the cool night air, he was about to become the center of a moment that would change everything. Raymond wasn't just any regular soldier. He was a titan in the Army, a title given to someone who had proven their strength and leadership through years of hard work. At 52, Raymond had earned his place as one of the most respected officers in the U.S. Army. His uniform, covered with medals, each telling a story of courage and sacrifice, shone under the diner's neon lights. The stars on his shoulders weren't just symbols of his rank, they were reminders of all the battles he had fought and the lives he had impacted. His uniform alone commanded respect. When people saw Raymond, they knew they were in the presence of someone important. But on that night, it would be that very respect that would cause trouble for him. Raymond had been driving for hours and he was getting tired. He had spent the entire day working and was now heading to a briefing at Fort Bragg, a military base known for being one of the most important in the country. It was a big deal, and Raymond knew that it would be another long day ahead of him. But before all that, he just needed a simple break. He parked his rental car, locked the door, and headed inside Ruby's diner. As he stepped through the door, Raymond felt the warm air from the inside of the diner greet him. It was a cozy little place, with a few truckers sitting at the counter and a family laughing at a booth. The place had a simple charm, and the low hum of conversation made it feel comfortable. Raymond walked in, and despite his impressive uniform, he wasn't looking for attention. He just wanted to eat and relax for a bit. The truckers at the counter barely looked up. They were busy with their own meals and conversations. The family sitting in the corner didn't seem to notice him either. But one person did, Jenny, the waitress. She saw Raymond walk in and immediately she greeted him with a smile. She didn't know who he was exactly, but she could tell from the way he carried himself that he was someone important. She was polite, friendly, and welcoming, which was just what Raymond needed after a long day. Raymond smiled back and walked over to an empty booth by the window. As he slid into the booth, he felt a bit of relief. The warmth inside the diner, the smell of food, and the quiet chatter from the other diners made him feel at ease. He ordered a cheeseburger, knowing it was exactly what he wanted, a simple, satisfying meal. While he waited for his food, he pulled out his phone to check his emails. There were messages from his coworkers at the Pentagon, and one text from his wife, Sheila, checking in on him. It was just another night, another stop on the road. He quickly texted Sheila back to let her know he was doing fine. Raymond felt like he was in his element. He was a soldier, yes, but he was also a person who enjoyed the little things: a good meal, a quiet moment, and the opportunity to recharge before heading to the next big task. But this night, this simple stop at Ruby's diner was about to take a turn he never expected. Outside the diner, as Raymond ate his meal and relaxed, things were slowly starting to change. Two police officers, Dale Ramsey and Travis Holt, were standing near their patrol car, smoking cigarettes and watching the world around them. They didn't know Raymond, and they didn't care to know. But something about the sight of his uniform caught their attention. The military plates on his car, the shiny uniform, everything about Raymond seemed like it didn't belong in a small town like Greystone. To them, Raymond didn't fit their idea of who should be driving a fancy rental car and wearing a uniform full of medals. Ramsey, the older of the two officers, squinted at Raymond's car. "Fancy ride for this dump," he muttered to Holt. Holt, younger and more eager to prove himself, looked at Raymond with a skeptical eye. "Military plates, but that guy looks like he's playing soldier," Holt said. The officers didn't check Raymond's vehicle registration. They didn't ask around or even take a moment to look at the situation with care. Instead, they just stood there watching and waiting. They assumed there was something off about Raymond. They were looking for trouble, and unfortunately, they would find it. Inside the diner, Raymond was completely unaware of the officers watching him. He continued eating his cheeseburger, answering emails, and checking his phone. But outside, the officers were getting more and more suspicious. Ramsey's eyes narrowed as he kept an eye on Raymond's car. Holt looked at Ramsey and nodded. "You want to check him out?" Holt asked. Without saying much more, Ramsey took a final drag from his cigarette and tossed it to the ground. They decided to approach Raymond. It was only a simple check, or so they thought. Raymond finished his meal and stood up from the booth, feeling full and ready to get back on the road. As he reached for his coat and keys, he heard the sharp voice of an officer. "Hey, you freeze." Raymond stopped immediately. He had been in high-pressure situations before, and this was no different. He wasn't afraid. His instincts kicked in, and he turned to face the voice. "Evening, officers," Raymond said calmly, keeping his hands visible and making sure the officers knew he wasn't trying to hide anything. But the officers didn't respond with professionalism. They stepped closer to him, their flashlights blinding him in the night. "That's a hell of a costume," Ramsey sneered, his voice filled with mockery. "Mind telling me where you got it?" Raymond stayed calm. He had been in situations before where people tried to disrespect him, but he knew how to handle it. "I'm Lieutenant General Raymond Reed, U.S. Army," he said, his voice steady. Holt didn't seem convinced. He circled behind Raymond, his eyes scanning his uniform. "General, huh? Big shot. Got a daho for that fairy tale?" Raymond's hand slowly moved to his pocket, where he kept his wallet. He took it out carefully, making sure the officers could see what he was doing, and handed it over to Holt. The officer looked at it quickly, barely glancing at the military ID before tossing it back at Raymond. "Could be fake," Ramsey muttered. "You don't look like any general I know." Raymond's jaw tightened, but he didn't react with anger. Instead, he calmly looked Ramsey in the eye. "How many black generals have you met, officer? Or is it just that I don't fit the poster in your head?" The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. The tension between them grew, and people inside the diner began to notice. More eyes turned toward the growing confrontation outside, and a few people pulled out their phones to record. Jenny, the waitress, stepped outside, her arms crossed as she watched the situation unfold. She could feel the injustice in the air. She wasn't sure what was going on, but she knew that something wasn't right. Ramsey didn't back down. Instead, his face twisted with anger. "Don't play smart with me," he growled. "We're verifying this. If you're lying, you're done." But Raymond stood his ground. "Call Fort Bragg. Ask for Colonel Denise Warren. She'll tell you who I am." Ramsey scoffed and stepped closer. "We're not calling your buddy for story time," he sneered, ignoring Raymond's request. Raymond kept his voice calm but firm. "I'm not resisting, but I won't comply with unlawful orders. You have no grounds to detain me." The officer's anger flared, and before Raymond could say another word, Ramsey lunged forward. He grabbed Raymond's arm and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to the ground. The cold metal of the handcuffs dug into Raymond's wrists, but he didn't fight back. He knew that if he made a scene, it would only make things worse. "You want to play tough," Ramsey hissed, his breath hot against Raymond's ear. "You're under arrest for impersonating an officer." Raymond stayed calm, even though his body hurt from the rough treatment. His mind was sharp, focused on what needed to be done next. As Ramsey shoved Raymond into the back of the police car, Jenny stood frozen outside the diner. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how to stop it. The crowd outside grew bigger as people began to understand what was happening. Phones flashed as people recorded, and the tension in the air was palpable. Inside the police station, Raymond sat quietly, still and dignified, as the officers tried to make jokes about his arrest. But Raymond's focus was clear. He wasn't going to let them get away with this. As the hours passed, Raymond's mind worked. He wasn't just thinking about his own situation, he was thinking about what would happen next. What if this was just another time when someone like him, a man of color, was treated unfairly simply because of the way he looked? The next morning, the world would know Raymond's story, and it would spread far beyond the small town of Greystone. Raymond stepped outside into the crisp night air, his boots making a soft clack on the pavement as he moved toward his rental car. The street lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows over the empty parking lot. It was quiet, too quiet, and Raymond could feel the stillness of the night. But that peace didn't last long. Suddenly, a harsh voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. "Hey, you freeze." The words sliced through the night like a knife. Raymond's instincts kicked in. His body froze instantly, trained by years of high-pressure situations. His back straightened, and his mind sharpened. Slowly, he turned to face the source of the voice. Standing there, just a few feet away, was Officer Ramsey, his flashlight beam aimed directly at Raymond's eyes, blinding him momentarily. Raymond's eyes adjusted, and he met Ramsey's glare. His posture was calm, his hands clearly visible, showing no sign of aggression. "Evening, officers," Raymond said, his voice steady and controlled. But Ramsey wasn't interested in pleasantries. His lips twisted into a sneer as he looked Raymond up and down. "That's a hell of a costume," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Mind telling me where you got it?" Raymond's jaw tightened. He had heard that kind of disrespect before, but he wasn't about to let it derail him. "I'm Lieutenant General Raymond Reed, U.S. Army," he said, his voice still measured, not a hint of anger in it. Officer Holt, standing behind Raymond, circled him like a predator, smirking. "General, huh? Big shot. Got a daho for that fairy tale?" he asked, the sarcasm evident in his voice. Raymond didn't flinch. He remained calm, his fingers moving slowly to his pocket, pulling out his wallet without hesitation. With a steady hand, he handed over his military ID, offering it to Holt. The officers barely looked at it before Holt dismissively handed it back. "Could be fake," Holt muttered, the contempt in his voice clear. "You don't look like any general I know." The words stung, but Raymond didn't let it show. He held Holt's gaze, then turned to Ramsey, his eyes unflinching. "How many black generals have you met, officer? Or is it just that I don't fit the poster in your head?" he asked, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of years of experience dealing with ignorance and bias. The air seemed to crackle with tension, and as Raymond spoke, a small crowd began to gather. People in the diner had started noticing the scene outside, and some had pulled out their phones to record. Jenny, the waitress who had served Raymond earlier, stepped outside. Her arms were crossed, her expression a mix of concern and defiance. She had seen enough. She didn't know Raymond personally, but she could see that something wasn't right. Ramsey's face reddened. His ego had taken a hit, and now he was angry. "Don't play smart with me," he growled, taking a few steps closer to Raymond, his body language tense with frustration. "We're verifying this. If you're lying, you're done." Raymond, still calm, met Ramsey's anger with measured words. "Call Fort Bragg. Ask for Colonel Denise Warren. She'll tell you who I am," he said, his voice never wavering. But Ramsey wasn't interested in verification. "We're not calling your buddy for story time," he sneered, his hands now resting on the hood of the car. "Get your hands on the car. Now." Raymond didn't move. He stood tall, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not resisting," he said quietly, his voice firm. "But I won't comply with unlawful orders. You have no grounds to detain me." That was the tipping point. Ramsey, frustrated beyond reason, lunged at Raymond. Before he could react, Ramsey twisted his arm with a brutal force, slamming him chest first onto the cold, metal hood of the cruiser. The sound of the impact echoed through the empty lot. The sharpness of the metal cut through Raymond's uniform, sending a jolt of pain through his body. But he didn't let it show. The cuffs snapped shut with painful force, digging into Raymond's wrists. The cold metal burned as it pressed into his skin, but Raymond stayed composed, his breath steady. He had been through worse. This wasn't the first time he had been targeted unjustly, and it wouldn't be the last. But what hurt more than the physical pain was the injustice of the moment. Ramsey leaned in close, his breath hot against Raymond's ear. "You want to play tough?" Ramsey hissed. "You're under arrest for impersonating an officer." The words felt like a slap in the face, but Raymond didn't let it show. His mind was still clear, still focused on the next step. He wasn't about to let this unjust arrest ruin him. "Call the Pentagon," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Do it now, or you'll wish you had." Ramsey scoffed, dismissing Raymond's request with a wave of his hand. As they pushed Raymond toward the police cruiser, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. But Ramsey ignored it, too caught up in his anger and pride to consider the consequences of his actions. The crowd outside had grown larger, and murmurs spread through the group. The phones clicked as people recorded the scene, and Jenny watched with a mix of disbelief and determination in her eyes. Raymond knew the truth. He knew he was in the right. He knew he had done nothing wrong, and he wasn't about to let these officers make him feel like a criminal. His hands were cuffed, his body hurt from the rough treatment, but his mind remained sharp. He wouldn't let them win. He wouldn't let them strip him of his dignity. This moment, this unjust treatment, was not his to carry alone. It was something bigger than just him. This was a fight for justice. As they shoved him into the back of the police cruiser, Raymond's eyes scanned the crowd. The faces of the people who had gathered, shocked and confused, stared back at him. He knew this wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger. It was about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. Raymond didn't shout, didn't struggle. He stayed calm, knowing that this was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Inside the Greystone police station, Raymond sat in a holding room, his posture unwavering, still undignified. His uniform, once pristine, was now slightly rumpled, but he remained unbroken. The officers outside, their bravado growing with the false belief that they had won, exchanged crude jokes. But Raymond, ever patient, waited. The station's chief, Ed Callahan, finally entered, holding Raymond's wallet. "This says you're a 3-star general," Callahan said skeptically. "Is that true, or are we wasting everyone's time?" Raymond, never one to back down, replied calmly. "Lieutenant General Raymond Reed, Joint Special Operations Command. It's true. Your officers would have known that if they had done their job instead of playing vigilante." Callahan, caught in the middle, rubbed his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "Fine. One call, but if this is a stunt, you're not walking out tonight." The phone was placed on speaker, and Raymond's voice filled the room. "This is General Reed. I need Secretary Hargrove, priority 1. Within seconds, Hargrove's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and commanding. "Raymond, where the hell are you? What's going on?" Without a hint of hesitation, Raymond replied, his words measured, yet powerful. "Greystone, Virginia. Local PD arrested me for impersonation and resisting. I've been cuffed and detained with no due process. I need this resolved now." Hargrove's response was immediate and fierce. "Callahan, who am I speaking to?" Callahan, now sweating, stammered out his name. Hargrove didn't pause. "Listen close. You've got a decorated general in your custody. Release him now, or I'm sending MPs from Bragg, and your governor is getting a call by midnight. Am I crystal clear?" The room froze. Ramsey and Holt, once so full of confidence, now stood defeated. Callahan, unable to hide his fear, nodded. "Get those cuffs off," he ordered. The handcuffs fell away, and Raymond stood, slow and deliberate. He walked out of the station, head held high, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. The air outside was still cold, but the weight of his ordeal burned deep within him. The days following Raymond's arrest brought about a whirlwind of attention that no one in Greystone could have predicted. The small town, which had once been a quiet, out-of-the-way place, became the focal point of national outrage. The story of the black general wrongfully arrested by 2 officers spread like wildfire. News outlets from across the country began picking up the story, and soon it wasn't just local headlines. It was everywhere. People from all walks of life were talking about Raymond and the injustice he had faced. On social media, the hashtag Justice for Raymond exploded. It became a movement, a rallying cry for people who were tired of seeing the same old story: unfair treatment, racial prejudice, and wrongful arrests. Videos of the incident, captured by bystanders, flooded the internet. People from every corner of the country watched, shocked by what they saw, and stood with Raymond. The hashtag spread quickly, gathering millions of supporters. Posts flooded Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, each one adding more fuel to the fire. In Greystone, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. What had been a peaceful, sleepy town was now alive with protests, conversations, and debates. People were talking in the streets, at the diner, and in their homes about what had happened. Many were angry, some were confused, and others felt the weight of guilt. They saw the videos, heard the story, and wondered how something like this could happen in their town. Some people showed up at the police station with signs demanding answers, while others called for a change in how the police treated people, especially those of color. It was no longer just Raymond's fight. It was a fight for the entire community, and many felt they had to be part of it. Jenny, the waitress who had witnessed the injustice and stood by Raymond, quickly became a local hero. She was a simple woman, not looking for attention, but the way she had stepped outside and tried to intervene had made a huge impact. She had seen the way Raymond had been treated, and her heart went out to him. As more people learned about her involvement, Jenny became the voice of reason in Greystone. She told her story to anyone who would listen, recounting the way Raymond had been disrespected and mistreated, and how she had tried to stand up for him. Jenny's courage inspired others to speak out too. She didn't back down. She made sure that everyone knew the truth. But for the 2 officers, Ramsey and Holt, things were about to take a turn for the worse. The town had already begun to turn on them, and the media storm only intensified their downfall. Within just a few days, they were suspended from duty. Their records were immediately placed under investigation, and every aspect of their careers was called into question. Public outrage grew stronger, and as more people learned about the incident, the pressure on the Greystone Police Department became unbearable. The final blow came when body camera footage of the arrest was released to the public. The footage clearly showed the officers' disrespect and their unlawful treatment of Raymond. It was undeniable, and it made their actions impossible to ignore. The police officers' careers, which they had worked so hard to build, crumbled in an instant. Ramsey, who had been so sure of himself, and Holt, who had eagerly joined in, now faced the consequences of their actions. They were no longer the respected officers they had once been. They were now the faces of a scandal, their names forever linked to a wrongful arrest that had sparked a national conversation. The body cam footage served as irrefutable evidence that their actions were wrong, and the public's fury made it clear that they could not escape accountability. Despite all the attention, Raymond didn't seek fame or recognition. He wasn't looking for people to admire him or give him a medal. What happened in Greystone was about something bigger than just him. It was about the treatment of black individuals, the systemic biases that still existed, and the courage it took to stand up in the face of adversity. Raymond never wanted to be a symbol, but that's exactly what he became. His story brought to light the struggles many people face, everyday struggles that go unnoticed or ignored unless someone like Raymond is brave enough to face them head-on. In the end, Raymond's actions sparked something much larger than a small-town scandal. His story became a conversation that needed to be had. It was a conversation about justice, fairness, and the need for change. Raymond had stood his ground, refused to be intimidated, and proved that one man could make a difference. His courage served as a reminder that, even in the face of unfairness, the truth always has a way of coming to light. Raymond's story didn't just change Greystone, it started a movement that stretched far beyond that small town. It reminded people that injustice, no matter how small it seems, affects everyone. It's a reminder that when someone stands up for what's right, it can inspire others to do the same. In a time when many felt the weight of the world was against them, Raymond's story gave hope. It showed that, even in a world filled with struggles, standing firm in your truth could be the key to making things right. Raymond didn't want to be a hero, but by simply standing tall, he became one, and the world noticed. In the weeks that followed the events in Greystone, Raymond Reed's life began to shift in ways he never expected. What had started as a routine stop for a meal had spiraled into a national movement, but Raymond never lost sight of his true mission: service. Though the world was now paying attention to him, Raymond remained focused on what he had always done best: leading others and mentoring the next generation of soldiers, officers, and leaders. He knew that his experience in Greystone, while incredibly difficult, was not just about him. It was about those who came after him, those who would face similar struggles and challenges in a world that still had so much work to do. Raymond's journey was never meant to be a personal triumph. Instead, it was a reminder that true strength lies in the ability to stand up not just for yourself, but for those who might not have the courage to speak out yet. In the quiet moments, when Raymond wasn't dealing with the public or the media, he was back at work, mentoring young soldiers, teaching them the values he had lived by for decades. He reminded them that leadership was not just about personal achievement. It was about building a legacy that could outlive the individual. Sometimes he would say, "It's not about fighting for yourself. It's about fighting for the next one coming up behind you." This mindset became his guiding principle. Even as his story became well known, Raymond's focus remained on those who needed his guidance the most: the young leaders who would shape the future. He saw their potential and knew that by sharing his wisdom and experiences with them, he could help build a better tomorrow. Raymond didn't want to be remembered as a victim of injustice or a man who was wrongfully arrested. He wanted to be remembered for his contributions, for his service, and for the way he lifted others up. He wanted his legacy to be about making a difference, not just in the military but in society as a whole. For Raymond, the road ahead was always about carving his place in history, not as someone who suffered, but as someone who rose above and inspired change. His message to the young soldiers he mentored was simple but powerful: don't just follow the path that's laid out for you, create your own path. And when you do, make sure it leads to something greater than yourself. Raymond was determined to ensure that the next generation would know that their worth wasn't defined by the obstacles they faced, but by how they responded to them. He was building a legacy, not only of military service, but of courage, leadership, and unshakable resolve. As time went on, Raymond's influence continued to spread. His story became an inspiration to those who had never met him, and to those who had heard the truth of what happened in Greystone. But what really mattered to Raymond wasn't the recognition. It was knowing that the lessons he taught would live on in the hearts and minds of the young leaders he mentored. And through them, his legacy would continue to shape the future long after he was gone. Raymond Reed was not just a man who had overcome an injustice. He was a man who had turned that injustice into a reason to fight for something bigger: a legacy of truth, honor, and service to others.